I'm going to share a few thoughts with you, and then we really want to spend as much time of the hour that we have kind of hearing how all these kind of thoughts about the future of our campuses, the future of our buildings, how we can make this all real. And so it becomes kind of an action-packed and hopefully a very interactive session together this morning. So when I think of education, I always pull up this slide, and my kids stand behind me when they don't stand behind me all day when I do my PowerPoints, but they walk by and they see this and they cringe and they don't want me to show this. So I always delete the slide, but then as soon as they leave, I put it back in. This is also probably 5 years ago, and it makes me excited and optimistic about our future and the youth and the innovation that comes from this generation. But it also makes me worried, because I'm thinking, we live in a very different world that I grew up in, and I look around the room, I think most of us grew up in, and I'm not quite sure if education is keeping up with the pace of change. And so figuring out how the industry of education can kind of leapfrog, and then the role of our campuses and our buildings that we can play in making learning more innovative, more resilient, more future ready, I think is what we're trying to discuss here today, so that my kids and your grandkids, I think, can continue to be on a path of transformation and innovation that we all so badly need. So these are the things that I thought, oh, I'm very familiar with, you all know, but almost none of these things my kids are familiar with. And the change that has come and the messaging that kind of underlies this, the transformation of this digital economy that we all been part of and all seen unfold in the last decade, is truly changing every industry and every job. So no matter what my kids want to be, what they're learning for, the jobs that there are today compared to 10 years ago, 15 years ago, are going to be different. But we'll talk then in a minute about why is then education still the same. Also, our kids are 100% mobile first. Everything is mobile. And if we already look, more than 60% of all traffic, internet traffic is on mobile devices. There's already 16 billion mobile connected devices today. Over 144 billion downloads of apps last year. And so if this is the world we live in, we need to start to think about not only the students that come to your institutions, but also your next generation employees that you want to hire and run your institutions. They live in this world, and the question is, how ready are we to support them? So this whole notion of there's an app for that, I always thought it was a joke, but actually Apple trademarked it in 2005, and they're right. If we think about 144 billion, 60% of it, by the way, is games and gaming. But that means there's still a lot of billion downloads of productivity apps and other solutions that we probably use on a daily basis, and even us, our generation. So this is the world we now live in. And we're not going to debate, because we need more than 1 hour, if this is a good world where we're all staring at our devices and glued to our mobile, fixated to our mobile devices. I'm sure you too are in the same house texting with your kids when you don't know where they are, and they're texting and watching video and doing all at the same time. But this is the crowd we are building campuses for and maintaining campuses for and creating learning spaces for. So we got to start to rethink the spaces we provide so that we accommodate this change, or at least figure out a way to make it work. And as I said earlier, this is your future facilities manager. And when I went to George Brown, I remember walking with our head of real estate through the basement where all our systems were, and there was a student sitting there, an internship, playing, I think, some video game on his phone. And while the head of facilities said, no, we have all these technicians, they know everything about the systems, they just love to be in the basement, this is where we belong. And I see the student look up and he nods like no to me. Because I think the next generation doesn't want to sit in the basement, doesn't want to sit between all the systems and automation that we're so used to. They want to sit like that and be able to control everything of your property, your systems, your devices. They want to see instantly what's wrong with it. They want to use innovation to maybe automatically or proactively fix things. And that's kind of where we're moving really fast to. and we'll talk about it in our discussion later. And you, with sitting on these massive campuses, how can we make sure you're ready for this new world very quickly? So the speed of innovation and the speed of change is coming. It's hitting your students at lightning speed. It's hitting every industry and every job that they're in your school for to learn for. So it's also going to hit and already hitting kind of what's happening on your campus. So it's not for long, and it's probably already happening with some of you, where blockchain is changing the credential, and so the whole academic enterprise is starting to transform how they issue credential and what a credential is, where service robots make it into your service centers, and they become kind of the front-end interface with students and faculty and visitors, and where you have autonomous devices like lawnmowers or delivery or autonomous vehicles and shuttles to connect your campuses that are going to completely transform the kinds of jobs you need on campus and what type of experiences you're going to provide on your campuses. And again, nothing of this is bleeding edge. Probably in many of your institutions, this is already happening. So the digitization of our education is happening right around our noses. The question though now is how intentional and intelligent are we going to be about kind of capturing these opportunities and steering them in the right direction, or letting this be the Wild West of connected things and IoT and all the buzzwords, and we're not taking control of the data and the power that our campuses could have. So here's then the conundrum. Our academic institutions really still are built on kind of the oldest piece of technology on earth, which is the book. We are still creating environments where we think knowledge is power, so the faculty has to sit at the front of the room in institutions that now exist already kind of more than 1,000 years. And I know some of you have maybe not 1,000-year-old buildings, but very old buildings. So I appreciate you got to have that conundrum, the glass, brand new innovative facilities right next to the 200-year-old facilities. But we still teach like this, where faculty at the front, students in the row, everyone behind row 3 is half asleep, and the faculty just drones on about whatever they're teaching, what probably could have been watched on some YouTube video. So who's still building lecture halls? Nobody? Oh, a few of you. So it's a different debate for different panel discussion, but the question is, do we really need lecture halls? If we think about mobile first, the next generation learning, the way we learn, and we've seen in Australia universities eliminating and rebuilding their lecture halls and getting rid of lecture halls and really starting to think about how we learn and how we teach as a way to reshape our physical campuses. Now, this notion that the faculty knows everything is also kind of finished, I think. The internet has really brought to us this democratization of knowledge. I can find anything I want and learn anything I want from anywhere, and I don't even really have to go to a library anymore. But if this is true, and now and this is why I said this morning, this is a learning session, because I'm here as much to learn from you that I hope I can instill some nuggets on you, that this and the future of learning is a two-way street. And therefore the shapes and the buildings, both physical and virtual, that we're going to create need to kind of accommodate this new type of learning and interaction. And knowledge democratization is just one of the kind of key main drivers that is changing, not just our sector, the education sector, but it's driving change in any industry. From, of course, all the impacts of the Industrial Revolution, the first all the way until the fourth, this digital age, the whole notion of digitization, and as I said, digitization is happening right under our noses. The next time in a new building, when you build an HVAC, or buy an HVAC system or security system, it's all digital, it's all connected, it's all internet addressable. So this is happening. But also this notion of globalization and demographics. Our students are getting older. Our students are coming back to learn more and to continue to learn, this lifelong learning notion. We all, and you do too, way more international mix. Many of you have presence in other countries, so the boundaries of our campus start to blur too. So I know many of us are worried and dealing with the physical asset right in front of us, but it's part of something much larger that we have an ability to shape. Then, of course, the pressure of climate change that is starting to rethink how we think about our buildings. And then the embrace of exponential technologies like robotics, like autonomous solutions, like artificial intelligence, like blockchain that are coming your way that the world is asking you to have an open mind to and figure out how it's going to help you deliver incremental value to all your stakeholders. And that's a tough place to be in, particularly in a world that is historically set in bricks and mortar and in stone and doesn't change that much. And now we're bringing the speed of technology and the resilience of bricks together and have to create new spaces that may go well beyond our physical campus. Now you add to this all the pressures you have, and I come from Canada and the pressures may be different. We're a public sector institution. I worked for a college, which is like a polytechnic college, a little bit different system that we have. At all the colleges in Canada, domestic enrollment is plummeting, but university enrollment is growing, so I'm sure you see lots of shifts and that you're constantly watching for. Maybe not you per se, but ultimately it's the enrollment and the student, and in the US often endowment and research that funds what it is you are able to do. Cost of operations through the roof, right? International students, international education, which huge pressure on additional services, student services and student support and housing. Tuition cost goes up and up. I was reminiscing of when I paid my tuition here, and now I send my kids to school and I look at not only tuition, also housing. It's just through the roof. The whole notion of micro-credentials and the future relevance of credentials. We've all read that IBM and Apple say, I don't care about credentials anymore. If you've done some boot camp, I'll hire you. I'm not sure if that will stick, but ultimately, alternative delivery and alternative learning models is going to put different pressures on us as our institutions. And I know many of you or some of you work for institutions with huge brand value that people from all around the world will come to anyways. But that doesn't go for every academic institution, and we got to be competitive in a very different way when our students don't want to just come anymore for a 3-year or 4-year credential, but now need a partnership with an institution to support their lifelong learning. And so how are we now starting to think about our buildings to support that much better? Because we have to change institutions, how we learn, how we teach, how we work, and how we deliver experiences. And the role you have to shape all this is massive. And I won't go through all of these, but you experience these, how we move from physical to virtual faculty, how we go from very linear learning to learning at your own pace, and that all has an impact on what student spaces we create, what learning spaces we create, what collision spaces we create, and how our spaces respond to the changing needs of our faculty and our students. And that is changing when we teach and where we teach, anytime, anywhere. It's changing the nature of the classroom. It's not just the students in the room anymore. They may be beaming in from other parts of the world, or you may be in a classroom, but you may really be visiting a museum in Italy as an experience. And of course, your institutions, like any other business, become more and more digital and digitized. So you become an IT company, if you will, if you may not want that, but where digital and technology starts to really weave in everything that you do. So I'm here to submit, and I know you know this, that's why you're here, that the physical plant and the campus is the catalyst and agent for change. And we've historically kind of separated that because real estate was just the buildings, but now in this new world where physical world and virtual world kind of start to combine, where maybe soon you're also talking about how to maintain the grounds and upkeep buildings in the metaverse, that you have an opportunity to lead the shift of the conversation from space and place and square feet and utilization to delivering experiences. And if we do that, we have to deconstruct space to the smallest components, if you will, and start to think about the data attributes that make up our spaces so we can now build it back up as delivering experiences. And so what are the 7 simple steps you kind of have to go through to deconstruct and to make your buildings more resilient and dynamic in this new world? First is everything's going to get connected. Not just the people in it and your staff, but all the systems, all the devices, from the light switches to the HVAC controllers to the security cameras, everything is going to be connected. And IT has been doing this for many, many years on the IT side, connecting them to IP networks. But you're now adding HVAC, lighting, parking systems, everything else becomes another digital connected device. All this has to be instrumented, so there has to be digital capability to it, so you can do something with it. Then it has to be integrated, so that now my occupancy sensor can unlock a door, can turn on the air conditioning, can lower the blinds. All the systems need to be able to communicate with one another in order to deliver these experiences. And I put this as number 4, but you could say after every bullet, this has to be done in a very secure way. Cybersecurity and securing your infrastructure, physical and digital, top priority, and I'm sure in your boardroom as well. If we've done 1 to 4, now we can add insights, and a simple way of saying dashboards, but knowing how the space is being used, what the energy is that is being consumed, what's the productivity of the space, the performance of the space. So once we add insights, we can start to improve, and we can use artificial intelligence or machine learning or analytics, more and more innovative solutions to help us improve our environment and optimize it based on the insights we have from all those connected systems and devices. And then last is, now we can start to transform our spaces and start to think, where does the boundary between our physical classroom and a virtual classroom? Some of you may already do this, but have classrooms in the metaverse, and I know it's still a little bit of an ambiguous term, but ultimately we're going to kind of move between the physical world and the virtual world, and we'd argue that data is really this binding agent for creating these new experiences across these different verses, the physical verse, the digital verse, and the metaverse. And you're sitting on all this data. Your buildings produce and have all this data that in most cases is still locked up and just needs to be freed and unleashed so you can start to deliver these experiences in ways we've never done before, including delivering classrooms of the future like this. So there's kind of 4 key steps here, and then I stop, and then we're going to talk about what does this all mean in the real world. First, you need to have a vision. You probably do since you're here, but it is to kind of understand where are we going with this and what do we want to achieve. Because the risk of all this technology and shiny object chasing is that you're going to spend a lot of money and a lot of time on something that actually doesn't help you achieve your vision and your aspirations. So be clear about where you're going. Then connect people, process, data, and things. Fundamentally important so that you can layer on the enterprise applications and the software and the analytics to make, to transform and to optimize. And then you're going to digitize every process, every interaction. And the only way really to do this is through partnerships. I know you're all very sophisticated real estate teams, but very few in the real estate commercial industry or education can really do this soup to nuts. Bring in many of the companies that are here. Bring in Darlene, bring in your partners, the hardware, the software, and do this together, because we know the world around you is changing so fast. The only way to do this is through collaborative ecosystems. And then the sky's the limit. We can start to imagine all the possibilities and start to deliver spaces for our students that I know my kids and eventually their kids are going to come to expect. And I think that change starts right here with real estate. So thank you very much. I hope I kind of gave a little bit of an out-of-the-box position, but also link it to the need for change. We can talk about how we integrate things and what business protocols and software, but we are all playing a role in the larger ecosystem, and we want to make sure that we understand why together we have such an impact on what education is and how we build and sustain educational institutions. That I thought I'll kind of start with that, but then I'll translate this into a conversation with 2 institutions and with Darlene, you all know Darlene, right? Do they all know you, Darlene? A little bit? Okay. Because as he said, I've known Darlene 15 plus years, but Darlene has had one of the most fascinating careers and has been in so many different parts of real estate, commercial real estate, and this space. So I think having Darlene on the stage and drawing from her experience, what she has seen is going to be super rich. So Darlene, please join. Then also Rizwan Ali, please. And I wrote down your title, so at least I could say that. From University of British Columbia, UBC, and Rizwan is Senior Solutions Architect. And then we have Colin Johnson, Associate Director of Systems and Services from Brown University. Join us for a little bit of a chat. Great. I have no watch. How we're doing?
Good.
It's 5 till 9? Okay. All right, thanks for joining. Okay, as Darlene said, we also want to hear from you and actually hear questions, but I have some warm-up questions to just get it going. Please just raise your hand or stand up if I don't see your hand, because we really want to make this interactive conversation with you rather than just us. But I do have a few kickoff questions. Darlene, you have been in the smart building space for a long time, and you've seen it from commercial and now from higher ed. We just talked briefly about from connect to instrument, like it's kind of a journey that we have to go through. Institutions have old buildings, new buildings. It's quite a complex marketplace. Can you kind of maybe reflect briefly on what you've seen in your career and how mature or how ready is this smart building or smart campus world? Because I'm sure you're all thinking, where are you sitting in this life cycle of smart buildings? And maybe you can kind of reflect a little bit and tell the audience where they are.
Sure. Thank you, Rick. So I've spent about 30 years in the industry doing smart building consulting. And you may not think the smart building industry is that old, or that I'm that old for that matter. But if you look at the history of a smart building, my career started off, out of college. I moved to Washington, D.C., and I got into property management. And so my background is actually in IT, back when it was Pascal, Fortran, COBOL, which I don't think anybody uses anymore. But my background and my passion is IT and technology. But I ended up in real estate, and I found that there was this huge gap between real estate and technology. That real estate tended to be a very bricks and mortar, conservative, old school kind of industry, and that there was a need for people who knew technology and who knew real estate to be able to bring the two together. And so I literally built a career around that. Had a consulting business for many years doing smart building consulting. And I was fortunate enough, it wasn't planned, but my company was acquired by JLL. And so I went from a small smart building consulting business to running the smart building program for the third largest commercial real estate company on the planet. Again, it wasn't planned, but it was phenomenal. And that experience, I had the fortune of being able to work with commercial and corporate real estate owners all over the world and really understand what the pain points were and help them use technology to meet those pain points and to solve those issues. And the technology is there. The reason I hate talking about the building of the future or campus of the future or whatever is because if you talk about what's going to happen in the future, it gives everybody a reason to procrastinate, right? And I always like to talk about what is here today, what is now. How are our kids living on a day-to-day basis? How are we living on a day-to-day basis? How do we take the technologies that we're so used to in our day-to-day lives and apply them to our buildings? And that's really my passion. And what I've learned over the last couple of days, so let me tell you first how I ended up at Planon. After I left JLL, I went to WeWork. Are you guys familiar with WeWork? So I spent 2 years as the head of smart buildings and digital workplace for WeWork, which was and still is the most disruptive force in commercial real estate. WeWork changed the face of the office forever. So it was an amazing opportunity for me to be the technology lead for WeWork. If you've seen We Crashed and you've heard the story about WeWork, you know the end of that story. And anyway, that's how I ended up at Planon. One of the gentlemen that I met at WeWork is actually on the board and chief strategy officer for Planon. And so he convinced me to come over and lead our North American operations. So I serve as the president of Planon for North America. But the reason that Planon is so heavily involved in the smart building space is it's the data, right? It's really all about capturing that data that's coming out of your buildings and doing something with it, visualizing it and putting it on dashboards and getting those insights. And that's what Planon does so well. So when I had the opportunity to join Planon and marry that with my smart building background, it was just mind-blowing and really an amazing company. If you don't know Planon, I really encourage you to get to know us a little bit better. But what I've learned over the last couple of days is that people are in various stages of that journey. Some are just starting off with the vision. Had a lot of side conversations with you over the last few days that, on a scale from 1 to 10, we've got a lot of 1s and 2s, and we've got some 4s, we have some 0s that just, just starting to think about it. So what's great about this type of a gathering is it gives everybody the opportunity to share their experiences and to learn from each other and hopefully to learn from us as well. So.
And I wanted to ask you about if you wanted to give them a grade. So you gave them a 1 out of 10.
No,
I'm just
there's
kidding.
some 1s and 2s and 4s. And I think that, your experience with Ave Maria University, 15 years ago, I mean, that was mind-blowing, smart campus project that was 10 or 15 years ago. And I would say that's a 10, right? So if you judge where the higher education community is compared to a case study like that, there's some 0s and 1s and 2s and 4s and 5s but the thing is, everybody's at least on that journey. Everybody's at least thinking about it, putting the foundation in place, starting to look at that roadmap. It doesn't have to be all at once. It can be a 3 to 5 year journey. I think the key is you got to start now. You got to put a stake in the ground and start that journey now.
Just how does education sector compare to when you see commercial, corporates? Is the education sector ahead, behind, on par when it comes to adopting smart, innovative?
So I would have thought the education sector would be ahead. I would have thought that this is, knowledge is your business, and that some of the brightest minds are the students in these universities that, as you said, probably know more about technology than a lot of the professors that are teaching those classes. So I think from a knowledge standpoint, you've got the ability and the mind power to apply a lot of these technologies to the facilities. I think the challenge is that there's a lot of kind of that legacy, old school mindset, and a lot of steeped in tradition, and maybe some of the decision makers are not as innovative and is not as forward thinking. So I think you really have to bring them into the conversation and make sure that they're on board with pushing things forward. Compared to commercial and corporate, in my experience, corporate real estate is probably the furthest along. When you look at the Googles and the Microsofts and the Facebooks and the Amazons and all the high-tech companies that have already applied these technologies in their spaces, and they live that way, I think that's really, if you step out of the higher education environment and you go see some of those facilities, or even walk into a WeWork, it'll blow your mind. I mean, the difference between what they're doing and what a lot of other institutions are doing is just night and day. So I think that higher education is, I would say, behind.
Yeah, and having been in higher education, I'd agree. And one little tip, certainly in Canada, what we do best in higher education is compare with our peers in higher education. We have a very myopic view of the world, and we just look at, what's Humber College doing or Sheridan College doing, and we're all in the same market. I think looking at other industries, other sectors, may be the way to go, really, and not look at your competitor, your peers, in terms of where this could be going. Okay, Darlene, thanks. Colin, you're with Brown, so maybe 2 quick questions. Can you briefly describe your role, just in a 1 sentence, so everyone kind of knows where you sit in this world? And then I am kind of curious from you, when we talked about changing nature of education, students having different expectations, I want to know if that is at all a driver or something you guys see or talk about that is triggering change, Or within facilities, are you disconnected from those conversations and you just do what you need to do? So I kind of want to know if what we talked about this morning, if that resonates and if that shapes you guys' thinking.
Oh, it definitely does. So yes, at Brown University, I'm the Associate Director of IT Systems and Services for Facilities Management. So I really manage our technology stack within facilities. I manage our relationships between facilities technologists and our central IT across campus. And I manage our IWMS system, which we recently migrated to in 2020. So your second question, I think, is great. I think in the past, facilities has been very disconnected from some of the student activities, from some of the how our students are seeing and feeling the campus. And our students are the people who are there 24/7. You know, we may be there 24/7 as well as facilities in a limited capacity, but our students live there. If there's an issue, they're the first ones to see it. They're the first ones to be hot or cold or to see something that's broken. So over the past few years, we've been kind of trying to equip our facilities technicians. Raise your hand if you have a smartphone. This should be most everyone, right? Okay, great. Raise your hand if your technicians at your facilities have smartphones. So everyone in this room and every college in this room is connected already. Sometimes when you start to think about smart campuses and smart buildings, it can be overwhelming, but I think we've already started to take some of the baby steps towards a smart campus, and we don't even know it. So just even connecting all these people, making it easier for our faculty, our students, our staff to connect with facilities, to report requests, to have more of a relationship with us, I think has been a really good priority over the last few years, especially as we transfer from the way we were working towards the way that we're going to work in our futures.
I will say that Brown is a 9.5.
More like an 8.
And thanks for saying that, because we talk often about new experiences and what the students want. That may be the trickiest part for you to start your investment in. It's enabling your teams and making data available on their devices so they can be more productive. Maybe really your lowest hanging fruit and your step one to get going, particularly since I'm sure all of you are dealing with an aging kind of support staff situation. And if they retire, who's going to come behind them? And if you're not kind of providing these capabilities and tools, we may end up ending with a huge kind of talent gap in this market. Sorry, Pauline, I realize there's no clock and I have no clue what's going on with the time. Would you be able to wave if we're kind of running? You will do that? Okay. Okay, good. I was just started to panic, like we could sit here for hours. All right, Rizwan, maybe very briefly, your role within UBC, and then we talk about journey, and Darlene said she heard that people are in different places. Can you kind of speak about where you are in the journey?
Sure thing. So my role is more at the IT level at the enterprise level across the university at UBC. And so they call me a senior solutions architect. I don't know what that means. If some of you do, please, find me and tell me. I'm kind of like, I'm an idea guy, right? I'm an idea guy. I'm essentially a technologist. And my role is at the university is to help envision both forward thinking and what's here right now, how we can use technology to help the university move forward with those experiences across the gamut at the enterprise level. And so in this particular domain of the physical spaces, one of the big things that's emerged right now we're going on a big cloud modernization journey, and I think many of you are kind of in that same boat. I've heard many that are making the switch, from your admin systems from a previous legacy stack to something like a Workday that's more cloud driven. And that we found is pulling us in our IT infrastructure, pulling us into the cloud and making us reimagine how our IT infrastructure works. And part of that discussion is about what are the enterprise tool stacks. And one of those enterprise tool stacks is this stuff. It's the stuff that takes care of our buildings, because the buildings are the physical campus, and we need the data of that to be integrated so that we can create a fully digital mesh with the data so that we can create experiences that transcend both the virtual and the physical. Now, we're at the beginning of that journey, and I think all of us are. I think there's a lot of hope too, though, because if you have any buildings that are on your campus that have been built in this century, they are creating data. They have telemetry. They are instrumented. We just haven't wrangled the data. And I think a lot of that reason is because we have so many other things going on. There's so many other, this has not been a strategic priority. And I think that is starting to bubble up and change. I've heard that theme amongst so many of us. And so I think there's a lot of hope. I think we're going to do a great job, but we have to prioritize it, right? We have to say that that is something that we're going to do that's on par with delivering physical spaces that inspire. And it's that, that first step. The important part of getting that first step off the ground, that vision step, is saying that this is important and we need to invest into it.
So Rizwan, you say about priority. Is this a topic in your boardroom?
Yes.
How about you, Colin? Are they in the boardroom, speak about the future of your campus, digitization of space, data?
People are definitely starting to. So there's definitely these future of work committees that are starting to form. There's these future of space utilization committees that are starting to form. And I think just like you said, Rizwan, we're so early in that conversation, but people are starting to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think, there are important ways in which the investment is already in place, but we haven't had the time to marshal our own resources within the university to use them. And COVID has been the heart attack that's made that leap forward, right? We could see Zoom, we could look at Teams as competition, or we could see it as the catalyst to push us forward and make this a priority so that we can do it way better than Teams and Zoom. Because I'm telling you, with the stuff that we have, that we own, with the people, with the physical resources that we have, we can do it way better. But we have to want to do that. And one of the first steps is to say that our building data, our geospatial data, that is part of our enterprise data at IT. And so that, I know so many of us here our responsibilities about keeping the physical space running, too hot, like make sure the faucet doesn't leak. That's what we got to make sure that that the buildings are comfortable and that they're safe and that they make all of the occupants keep them healthy and happy. But I would humbly say that we also now need to start thinking of ourselves as technologists. Making sure that the plumbing and the electrical is working is great, and that's kind of table stakes. But you also have to think about how those parts are digitally connected. That is going to become part of our responsibilities as well.
So both of you are IT people in facilities teams, right?
So I help with the university at an enterprise level.
You're in IT or in your facilities?
I'm in IT.
You're in IT.
Yeah.
But
I'm in facilities, yes.
So I've heard some of you either have intermediate, like people in between, IT people in facilities. So how many of you would you say have an incredible relationship between facilities and IT? Oh, okay, it's more than I expected, to be honest. How many of you within facilities have IT roles now? People that have an IT background, IT roles? Almost the same hands too. So maybe you're the gluing facilities and IT together. Because I agree with some of the points here that this is not just a facilities conversation anymore. We're seeing all this data and intelligence managed and handled by IT. You probably need IT before you get an enterprise application approved in some way or another. And if you don't, I know IT is probably not liking you very much. And so I think the relationship between IT and facilities needs to be forged to support this world, but is not always very strong. So, Darlene, the relationship between IT and OT is one. What other obstacles or challenges have you seen why this wouldn't be more mainstream? Why aren't we, not us as a sector, but in general, more embracing and pushing and faster when it comes to adopting smart campuses, smart technologies? What is holding us back?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is really aligning the stakeholders within the organization. What we've seen in the industry is that most companies, most institutions buy technology in silos. because the organization is in silos. So in each stakeholder group buys solutions to meet their own independent needs. So you end up with a whole bunch of individual point solutions. And whether that's in the buildings, whether that's your software, and so I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is aligning the stakeholders within the institution to put together an end-to-end holistic technology roadmap, to really understand what technologies do we need at an enterprise level that can meet the requirements of all those stakeholders, instead of having multiple solutions within the organization. And the other big obstacle, quite frankly, is this perception that smart campuses or smart buildings cost more money than dumb buildings. And this has been one of the biggest obstacles, literally, that I've helped organizations overcome throughout my entire career. And I think that you really have to look at the value that smart buildings, smart campuses brings to your constituents, to your end users. And anytime you can put value associated with a cost, and that value is greater than the cost of that investment, you're ahead of the game. So at JLL, we used to call this the 330-300 principle. And that represents the average amount of money that people would pay for energy, which is $3 a square foot per year, versus space, which was about $30 a square foot per year, versus people, which is about $300 a square foot per year. So when you look at the 330-300 principle, and you realize that most smart building conversations used to focus on energy and reducing energy costs, but that's the lowest value proposition in the entire discussion. But if you look at energy versus space versus people, and you focus on the people, and you focus on the use of technology for the sake of making your people more productive and making the people happier and healthier, that's where you really get the value of smart. So the big obstacle is overcoming that perception that investment in technology in your buildings is expensive, because if you look at the outcome and the value that comes out of it, it's off the charts.
So Colin, do you have, because I saw your mic move, do you have another obstacle that you bump into? And then I'm interested from you and from you, Rizwan, how did you make the business case? How did you talk ROI or convince your organizations to go and make big enterprise overhaul investments? Colin.
So, one of the things you brought up, Darlene, I think is a great point. A lot of facilities, and at least in my experience in the past, has been pretty siloed. We've had our own IT within facilities. We have started to really build out that relationship between facilities management and central IT over the last few years. And one of the biggest things that we did was we formed a steering committee. So we have people from the network team, people from our database team, our Windows team, central IT leadership. They meet with us monthly at facilities with our leadership there to talk about some of those priorities and to talk about some of the new technologies and roadblocks that we could lift. And that's something that we haven't really had in the past. So just forming that committee of people and getting the right people in the room to make sure we're all aligned on our facilities services roadmap has been huge for us.
How about ROI? Did you have to prove and make some business case that showed the impact on the energy, the real estate, or the people that justified major systems overhaul? Because they're not cheap journeys, right?
So I think a lot of that comes into the building standards. So, there's part of it is retrofitting some of these older buildings that we have on campus. Brown's a very historic campus. To go in and retrofit these old buildings with new technology can be very expensive. But in our new buildings, we've worked to update our building standards to include, Lutron smart lighting, to print QR codes directly on the signs that they align with our space, journey for the next few years. So I think that's kind of like an easy place to start. Work with your planning team, start to build some of these technologies, digital room signage, wayfinding, QR codes, build these things into your new buildings that you're building. And I think that's where you'll find the easiest sell. Like, it's something that's already getting a grant or it's already being paid for. There's a donor, there's a sponsor. Right. Like, that's where you can start to put in some of this new technology. But trying to make a case to retrofit older buildings with smart lighting and smart controls, it can be really expensive and prohibitive.
So as Rizwan prepares his thought on ROI discussion, I'd like to make sure we open this up to. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. I'll be watching out. for anybody. So Rizwan, how do you make the case to make these big overhauls and systems investments?
So for us, all of this stuff, we're a Planon customer. We're about 2 years on our Planon journey. And it was a component of our overall cloud transformation, technology modernization. And we didn't choose that. It was kind of chosen for us because at UBC, we had a previous generation of ERP that spanned our finance, HR domain, and our facilities management. And we're putting that away. Like, we had wrung every drop of value out of that thing over 20 years, and now it was time to move on. And so we were kind of pushed that way. And so when we knew we had to take this step. We were in a position where we had to take this step. And so, well, let's do that step. Let's take that next step as smartly and as future forward as we could. But what I will say is that we found it to be, we were anticipating it to be expensive. It's even more expensive than we thought. But that's just the new world. And, it's kind of it's one of the dynamics that we as technologists, as IT organizations have to rationalize, and we have to figure our way through. But the other point was that, I think these are conversations that have been percolating for years, if not decades, amongst amongst big institutions. And it's not just in universities. The same dynamic happened in the private sector, except they had their come to the light moment with cloud transformation maybe about 7 years ago. And now big organizations, for us as a Canadian in the public sector, are coming to it now. And that's part of the push. And so it's also, yes, there's, you can go and make the business case and find out, that this is something you want to do, and how do I justify that, and how do I create the right context for bringing everybody else along. In universities, you have so much of our decision making are in governed spaces. You have steering committees. And we think about these things, and we have to dot every I and cross every T before we make a step. But this is a particular time it's like where strategy and tactics come together, because you're being forced by this cloud modernization push, which you can't ignore and you can't put off anymore. Plus, you have the heart attack of COVID, so you have an opportunity now to strike.
Well, and I think that leads to the next question. What is the cost of not digitizing your campus and not digitizing your FM? You were put in a position where you had to move that. The whole world is moving that way.
Yeah.
So the question is, what's the cost of not taking that step?
I agree, there's really no choice. But still, and it's not that long ago, I was in a meeting where we had to defend the investment in technology, and it was pushed back by the client. But then they approved a flight in a private jet to Italy to go touch marble and granite. Somehow that was worth every penny. But thinking about the use of digital and data was suddenly like a foreign topic. So it's still a mind shift in how we think about buildings and our built environment and what is important. We got the 5-minute cue. Any questions or any comments from the audience? Yes. So Devin asked how to break down the silos and the budgets that are associated with it and have an integrated approach towards a sector that is highly fragmented. And just a brief comment, what I see in the commercial space is actually the creation of a new role that kind of cuts through all IT and facilities. And we see this at high levels too, senior vice president level of smart buildings and innovation that kind of have a coordinating, curating role of budgets and making sure that investments made on the left are connected to or associated with investments made on the right. So it requires a level of coordination that is not native, and you're right, everyone's sitting, and you cannot do this on the side of your desk. You got to have a very integrated and purposeful approach for this. How do you guys deal with this?
My job is to make that magic happen. And so it needs to be an IT thing. Like, we determined for UBC that the place where we can have the most success at solving the problem that you're talking about is with IT. Because it's the data and the technology that spans across. We need to connect our student-facing systems and our research-facing systems, where we have, those are other things in our portfolio that we do things and we're buying stuff for, and that care, that need to know about the physical spaces. That is an integration story, but that's also an enterprise IT story. And that's been our solution. We've had some, it's been stumbles, but it's worked. Like, we're getting somewhere.
How about you, Colin?
Same here. I mean, I think one of the biggest pieces of value, not only breaking down those silos between facilities management and our central IT support, but breaking down the silos just inside of facilities management. I mean, over the last couple of years, we've formed an internal steering committee just to prioritize the things that we want to work on in regards to our IWMS system. So we have somebody from our space team. We have stakeholders from our custodial team, stakeholders from our planning team. We get together once a month and say, here's the top 10 things we know are problems and that we want to work on, but we want to hear from you. What should we prioritize as an organization? And before, it was us just kind of picking things that seemed like we wanted to, like, here's our priorities, but the priorities of the organization may be a little bit different from the priorities of IT within your organization.
Yeah.
Well, I'll also say it's not so much other groups don't want to share their budget, but think about the power that you have if everybody combines their budgets. So I worked with a client once that we were trying to solve for occupancy, and we found that there were 4 or 5 or 6 different groups within the organization that were trying to solve for the same data set. So you had the IT group that was solving for occupancy by scraping Wi-Fi data. You had the security team that was solving for occupancy by badge swipe data. You also had a different group within security that was solving for occupancy with CCTV cameras. Then you had the real estate team that was solving for occupancy by putting sensors under desks. Then you had the cleaning group that was solving for occupancy by putting sensors on bathroom doors to count people going in and out of bathrooms. And when we put them all in the same room, and everybody's like, well, wait a minute, I didn't know you have occupancy data? I have occupancy data. And my occupancy data doesn't match your occupancy data. And by putting all of them in the same room and realizing that they have a use case for the same data set, and let's figure out how do we solve for occupancy across the organization, put that data in the cloud, and then everybody can pull the data they need out of it and combine all 5 or 6 of those budgets. That's where you have that aha moment.
Thank you. I think we're out of time. Yeah, so I just wanted to just kind of wrap up. So I think the message here is the smart campus, and I know you've talked about this for the last 2 days. This is a journey. There's no one final end state, not like, oh, we're done now, it's finished. This is kind of the new way of working. And this train has left the station. If we're not actively engaging or being intentional about shaping this, then our vendors and suppliers and the systems we buy and the stuff that goes in our buildings and what our students expect is going to be digital and digitized. So we have a huge opportunity to kind of course correct and own this journey. And to the last point made, money is being spent. You're spending lots of money on facilities and real estate, and in often cases in variety of pockets. So this is not about additive new money that is outrageous. This is about using the money and the resource you have smart to create smarter facilities. And in order to do that, you need data. And there's a limit to it, because you could have all data points, but if you don't use it, then it's expensive and wasteful too. So being smart about what data you use and what value you pursue first, and because you cannot solve for every problem all at once, is going to kind of set you on this journey, and it's going to either save you money or make you money that can then be reinvested. So I strongly believe this is actually a journey that doesn't cost necessarily more, and I agree with the point I think you made, Rosamund. It always costs more, but in reality we built a wood building at George Brown College, and when we started the project it was $100 million, and then wood prices went up, but it was $200 million. So cost of construction and buildings and facilities goes up. Just be smart about how you spend it, and fully embrace this digital world that is shaping and reshaping everything we do, because your employees, your team, your staff, and your customers, and ultimately they're paying for all of us, are going to expect it. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sharing. We could sit here for hours, but much appreciated. Have a great rest of the day. Thanks.